Hello guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to my true crime YouTube channel where I go into all the details of a true crime case whilst I do my makeup. As you can see, I am starting this video off a tiny bit differently. I actually already have my makeup done. This is the makeup look that I'm going to be showing you how to do in this video, and all the products that I'm going to use will be linked in the description. I do feel I should give a very quick content warning that we are going to be discussing some pretty dark topics in today's video, such as murder, sexual assault and paedophilia. So if you are at all unsure about this video or feel like it might affect you in any way whatsoever, do feel free to click off and watch something else. I'd also like to give a disclaimer that all the information I have compiled in this video has been sourced from the internet, news reports and family statements, and although it is of course never my intention to spread misinformation or cause offence to anybody involved, please do let me know down below if you see any false information. So with that, let's get right into the case. The crime that we are going to be looking into today takes place in Brighton, England, and is generally known as the Babes in the Woods murders. For those of you who may not know it, Brighton is a seaside town in the south of England. It's about 50 miles away from London, and it's most well known for its really pretty beaches, little boutique shops, and it also has a very famous pier. So in October 1986, two 9-year-old girls by the names of Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows were living in an area of Brighton called the Molescombe Estate, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is in the north of Brighton. So I would generally say that Brighton is considered to be a very, very safe place. Given that it's only a short train ride away from London, it's a very popular destination for Londoners kind of wanting to get away from the city and visit the seaside. But back in 1986, when this crime took place, it was quite a different place. There was quite a bit more poverty around Brighton than there is now, and also depending on what area of Brighton you were in, there was a stark contrast in sort of safety. The Molescombe Estate, where the two girls were living, was actually ranked as the 11th most dangerous place to live in Brighton. The girls, however, didn't really seem to be affected by this in their early lives. They grew up having relatively normal childhoods and both went to local schools. And although they actually went to different schools growing up, they became really, really good friends because firstly they lived in a similar area, and also their mums had actually become friends. So on the 9th of October 1986, the two girls, who I mentioned were 9 years old at the time, came home from school as usual at around 3:30 p.m. They both briefly went back to their own houses before meeting up again and going to play outside. The two girls were actually unaccompanied on this day, but there wasn't really much reason for concern from their parents because firstly, the girls knew the estate very, very well. They'd both grown up there, and also where they were playing was visible from Nicola's house, so Nicola's mum was easily able to see what the two girls were getting up to. At around 5:30 p.m. that evening, Nicola's mother, Susan, just kind of glanced out of the window to check on the girls, see what they were getting up to. And I believe that when she saw them, they were playing with roller skates or rollerblades or something like that, very near the house. Nothing at all out of the ordinary. But little did Nicola's mum know that next time she glanced out of the window, the girls would be gone, and that was the last time she would ever see her daughter alive again. At some point after 5 p.m, I'm guessing relatively soon after Nicola's mother had seen the two of them playing, Nicola and Karen actually slipped away to a few shops on a nearby road called Lewes Road. And here they were spotted by a 14-year-old family friend who told them that they should probably go home because it was getting late and that their parents would be worried. I think the two girls, however, must have had a bit of a mischievous streak to them because instead of heading back home to their families, Nicola turned to Karen and said, "Why don't we go over to the park?" And she motioned towards Wild Park, which is one of the biggest parks in Brighton. Although the park was technically pretty near the two girls' houses, they'd actually never been in there because their parents forbade them from entering it. Now, I know it would be so easy to look back on this case, having heard everything that happens, and think, oh, the two girls shouldn't have been allowed out on their own, or they shouldn't have gone where they weren't allowed. But let's be honest, when you're 9 years old and there's a rule that you're not meant to break, the number one thing that you want to do is break that rule. I know that when I was 9 years old, if there was somewhere that I was told I wasn't allowed and I wasn't really given a good reason for it, I would 100% take the first opportunity to go there. Anyway, around an hour and a half after Nicola's mother had last seen the two girls, so around 6:30 p.m, the two of them were spotted near a police box on Lewes Road. And if you're thinking, isn't a police box the thing that's in Doctor Who? Yes, it is, and yes, they actually did exist. It was basically just like a little room that police could use when they were out and about, if they were waiting for a car to come and collect them, or they were filling in paperwork, or they needed to make a call, and they were used very frequently throughout the 20th century. Now, the reason that this is significant is because around the same time that the girls were spotted near this police box, a man named Russell Bishop was also spotted nearby. And remember this because it's important, he was said to be wearing a blue sweatshirt. So I feel at this point I should introduce this man, Russell Bishop. Bishop was born on the 9th of February 1966, so he was 20 years old at the time of this case, and he was well known around the Molescombe area as being a bit of a ladies' man, a petty thief, and just generally a bad piece of work. He actually had a long-term girlfriend at the time who he had one child with and who was also pregnant with their second child. The two of them actually lived together in an area of Brighton called Hollingdean, and although he seemed to have this long-term steady relationship, it was well known throughout the area that he also had a string of young, often teenage girlfriends, some of whom were even still in school. Not only this, but he also seemed to have an inappropriate interest in young girls and was even caught wolf whistling at young girls as they walked home from school. And as if that wasn't bad enough, there were also rumours that he had blackmailed young girls in the area to appear in his homemade adult movies, I think you can guess what those are, which he then proceeded to pass around to all the other men on the estate. So you've probably got an idea by this point of what kind of guy this was. Basically, not somebody that you would ever want to associate yourself with. It's also worth mentioning that at the time of this case, in 1986, Bishop's current sort of girlfriend alongside his long-term girlfriend was Marion Stevenson, who was 16 years old at the time, and she happened to live just around the corner from Nicola and Karen. So not only did Bishop's girlfriend live around the corner from the girls, linking him to the case, but Bishop also actually played football and cricket with Nicola's father, Barry. Not only that, but also in 1986, Dougie Judd, who was one of Bishop's friends, was actually lodging with the Fellows family, so Nicola's family. From what I could find online about Dougie Judd, although he was friends with Bishop, he seemed very, very aware of his kind of unsavoury reputation and even warned Nicola and Karen to stay away from him because of his clear interest in young girls. Anyway, going back to this particular day in question, the 9th of October 1986, Bishop had actually gone to Nicola's house earlier that day trying to find Dougie. Surprisingly though, Nicola was actually the one to answer the door rather than Dougie or either of her parents. And from what I could find out online, the two of them seemed to have a bit of a sort of verbal altercation where Nicola ended up calling Bishop's girlfriend a slag. I couldn't actually figure out what actually caused this argument, whether Nicola had a genuine dislike for Bishop's girlfriend or whether she was just trying to get him away, who knows. But all I could tell is that they ended the conversation on very bad terms. So fast forward again back to that evening, the two girls are on Lewes Road where they left their acquaintance and entered Wild Park. Now, it's not actually known which exact route the girls took through the park and when exactly they ran into danger, but at around 9 o'clock when the two girls failed to come home for their bedtime, Karen's mother began to panic and decided to call the police. When the police arrived, they obviously tried to rule out all the sort of logical places that the girls could be, but when there was still no sign of the girls, a party of over 200 neighbours, friends and locals gathered together and started a search for the two girls. The search actually continued on well into the night, and a helicopter was even brought in to kind of do an aerial search over Wild Park, but there was still no sign of the girls. Conveniently, one person who actually joined in the search was Russell Bishop, whose reason for kind of being there and helping out was that he said that his terrier, Misty, so his dog, was actually a £17,000 insured tracker dog, which could help the police with their search. Now, one other thing that was kind of generally acknowledged by everybody who knew him was that Bishop was a habitual liar. He lied about everything, he lied to try and big himself up, and this was kind of the perfect example. It was just a complete lie. So anyway, as I said, the search continued on all the way through the night, but it wasn't until the afternoon of the next day, the 10th of October, that two searchers, Kevin Rowland and Matthew Marchant, found the bodies of the two girls, Nicola and Karen, in a makeshift den in Wild Park. Conveniently enough, two of the very first people to rush to the scene were a police constable and Russell Bishop. Once the police arrived at the scene, it was immediately obvious that not only had the two girls been violently strangled, but they had also both been sexually assaulted. An investigation into the murders was immediately started by the police, and unsurprisingly, one of the first names to be brought up due to suspicious behaviour was that of Russell Bishop. So not only had Bishop been very, very involved in the search, almost to kind of a suspicious extent, but also the police constable who first arrived at the scene with Bishop said that he had acted in a very bizarre way when he first came near to the bodies. He didn't really want to go too close to them and couldn't really see them even from where he was standing, almost as if he had seen them before. And not only that, but also when he was questioned by the police, his story was just littered with inconsistencies. So the first story that Bishop gave the police when they asked him, what he was doing in the area, was that he had planned to steal a car from the nearby campus of Sussex University. So not exactly a story which is going to make the police less suspicious of him. But anyway, he later changed this story and said that he had been planning to go to a local newsagent's to buy a newspaper before realising that he didn't have any money. Another story that was thrown into the mix as well was that Bishop had planned to go and see his girlfriend Marion, remember the one who lived around the corner from Karen and Nicola, but instead of going to see her, he had actually bought some marijuana and decided to go home alone instead. About as confusing as it sounds. After speaking to Bishop extensively, the police actually had enough evidence to arrest him on suspicion of murder. However, as he was being brought into the police station, Marion, Bishop's girlfriend, showed up and started shouting at the police and assaulting them basically, and saying that they had got the wrong man. Not only this, but she also said that one of the girls' fathers was the one who was responsible for the murders. Although the police were obviously not going to let Bishop go that easily, they did actually look into this claim, and Nicola's father Barry, along with Dougie Judd, who, if you remember, was Bishop's friend and also the fellow's family lodger, were both arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to sexually assault Nicola. The charge was actually dropped against them a little while later, and it was said by the judge later on in court that it was actually nothing more than an unfounded rumour. So Bishop remained in custody until the following year, 1987, when he was taken to Lewes Crown Court on suspicion of the murders of Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows. Amazingly, however, he was actually acquitted by the jury after only 2 hours of deliberations due to a series of mistakes that the police had made in their investigation. I still really don't know what was the cause of all these mistakes, whether it was a flaw in the operation or whether it was an individual, but all I can really say is that the police royally messed this one up. The first mistake that the police had made at the scene was that the forensics team who had come to look at the bodies of Karen and Nicola had failed to record their body temperatures at the time that they were found. So that basically meant that there was absolutely no way to tell what time the girls had actually been killed, how long ago it was. The police believed that the girls had been killed sometime between 6:15 and 6:30 p.m. that evening, but since they hadn't recorded the girls' body temperatures and they had no substantial proof that this was the time that they had been killed, there was no way that they could prove Bishop's alibis to be false. Another blunder that was made at the scene is one that actually blows my mind. So we know, as I said before, that the two girls had obviously been strangled at the scene. The other thing that the police failed to do was firstly to take any measurements of handprints or anything around the girls' necks. Not only that, but they also didn't take any fingerprints whatsoever from the scene. There was also a substantial amount of blood found in Karen's underwear, but again, the forensics team failed to take any analysis of this. They didn't find out whether it was Karen's, whether it was somebody else's, whether it contained semen, nothing. I just find this absolutely mind-blowing. Like, surely it is just common knowledge that the first thing that you do when faced with a crime scene is firstly to cordon off the whole area so that nobody can tamper with evidence or anything like that, and secondly, to take fingerprints. The only excuse really that I can kind of think of is that similarly actually to the case that I recently covered on Melanie Road, DNA tracing was only in its infancy at this time. It was only 2 years after the Melanie Road case. So the only thing I can really think of to excuse it is that the police just didn't take any fingerprints or anything like that because it wouldn't really have been much use to them at the time. But I mean, still, at least just like take it, and then if you don't use it, get rid of it. Like, surely. So the only thing really that the prosecution had that they could use to kind of pin down Bishop as the suspect for this murder was the discovery of, and I hope you guys remember this from earlier on in the video, a blue Pinto branded sweatshirt which was discovered discarded near some railway tracks at a nearby train station. Just in case you don't remember, earlier on in the video I said that Bishop had been spotted near Lewes Road at the same time as the two girls, and he was wearing a blue sweatshirt. However, surprise, surprise, the police had messed up again, and this sweatshirt could not be used as anything in the court because it had not been properly preserved as evidence. Now, there was one very, very small piece of hope that the prosecution could hold onto to try to pin down Bishop as this killer, and that was that Jennifer, Bishop's long-term girlfriend, had said before she was brought into court that she had seen Bishop wearing a light blue sweatshirt. However, unsurprisingly, when Jennifer was brought to the stand in court, she completely retracted her statement. In fact, she said that she hadn't even made that statement at all. And not only that, but she said that the police had fabricated this statement altogether and forged her initials. So from this story, it would be very easy to assume that Jennifer was just a loving, caring girlfriend who desperately wanted to save her boyfriend from a potential lifelong jail sentence. However, there is one more aspect of this story which I feel I should go into a little bit, just because it does kind of give her another motive. So it was discovered that a very well-known newspaper at the time, known as News of the World, had offered Jennifer £15,000 to sell them the story of Bishop as an innocent man. So in simple terms, Jennifer basically knew that if she lied on the stand and Bishop was acquitted, she would have a massive financial benefit. So since Jennifer had now retracted her statement saying that she had seen Bishop in the blue sweatshirt, the only thing the prosecution could really hope for was that they might finally catch Bishop in one of his famous lies, given Jennifer and Bishop's stories were so littered with inconsistencies and sort of changes of story. However, the jury were unable to say that they believed without a reasonable doubt that Bishop was responsible for the murders, and so he was acquitted. And not only was he a completely free man, but he was also £15,000 the richer due to Jennifer selling his story to the news of the world. In the years that followed, no more progress was made on the case. Bishop was now a completely free man until 5 years later in 1991. And this was when the very same Russell Bishop was convicted of attempting to kidnap, molest, and murder a 7-year-old girl in Brighton. Luckily, this girl managed to escape with her life after Bishop had sexually assaulted her and left her for dead, and for this, Bishop was sentenced to 14 years in prison. So at this point, we have an unsolved case of 2 young girls who have been sexually assaulted and murdered, and we also have a young man who is currently locked up for attempting to kidnap, assault, and murder a young girl in Brighton. I don't think it takes a genius to put 2 and 2 together. So Bishop remained in prison for over a decade for the attempted murder of the 7-year-old girl in Brighton until 2005, when under the Criminal Justice Act, he was given a fresh trial for the murders of Karen and Nicola. The Criminal Justice Act basically meant that a criminal could be tried again under a new trial if new and compelling evidence came up to link them to a crime. And in this case, very similarly to the Melanie Road case which I covered, DNA tracing had come on absolutely leaps and bounds since Bishop's first trial. And this meant that when the crime scene was re-examined, there was a direct DNA match found linking Russell Bishop to a DNA sample which was found on a plaster on Karen Hadaway's arm. So Bishop was taken from his cell, which he was being held in for the attempted murder of the other young girl in Brighton, and was then arrested for the murders of Karen and Nicola. And on the 10th of December 2018, a jury of 7 men and 5 women found Russell Bishop guilty of the murders of Karen Hadaway and Nicola Fellows. And on the next day, on the 11th of December, he was sentenced to life in prison. Almost 6 months later, on the 19th of May 2019, Jennifer Johnson, Bishop's girlfriend at the time, was also sentenced to 6 years in prison for her involvement in the crime, basically lying about the sweatshirt. So although no amount of prison time can ever make up for what Russell Bishop did to not only Karen and Nicola, but Karen and Nicola's families on that day, I'm glad that the police at least finally managed to pin him down to prevent him from doing that to anybody else ever again. Anyway, that is all I have for you on this case. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then make sure to let me know down below, and let me know if there are any particular cases you want me to cover as well. Don't forget to subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.